Hi, and welcome to CAFMA Connect. I'm your host, Fire Chief Scott Freitag, and with me today is my special guest, Administrative Chief Dave Tharp.
Hi, everyone.
Dave got stuck here today because, this is his last days before he goes in for surgery, and then we get to pick on him a lot after that. But
everybody seems to think like I'm going to die from this surgery or something because everybody keeps saying it's your last days.
Well, you're not going to die from it. Senior staff has had a discussion, and we do feel it best if your doctor issues us a wheelchair for you.
There's no way, because I know what you guys are going to do. You're going to use me as a guinea pig for some wild races down the parking lot.
You don't know exactly what we're going to do. I mean, that might be one of them, but there are multiple opportunities.
Your version of the Jackass movie is not going to come to fruition. I'm just telling you.
I don't know. We might try. So for everyone out there, before we started, Dave said you might have to cover up your Rockstar can. And as I said last week, they are not a sponsor, but Rockstar, if you're out there listening and you would like to sponsor the CAFMA Connect, feel free to give us a call.
We have several dozen viewers.
Yeah, we have several dozen people that watch this.
Tens of viewers.
Tens of viewers. But you know what? We have some ideas to make this more fun. Obviously, the topic today does not make it more fun. So we're going to have some fun first, and then we'll talk about the T word, the T word being taxes. But Jonah, you were able to get live feed of the Crooks fire from one of our communication tower sites.
That is correct.
And as I looked at this, Dave, now when I first pulled it up and he said, we've got a great view of the fire, I'm thinking, I'm going to pull this up, I'm going to see flames. And I pull it up, and I saw smoke, which is what I see out my window and what I'm breathing in my office currently.
What most people in Prescott are seeing and throughout the area. Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it struck me, though. I'm like, wow, if CNN or Fox News had this footage, they could make 12 hours worth of coverage out of this video.
I think we should turn it over to C-SPAN. C-SPAN seems to have, the market on being able to watch really boring things and yet make it somehow interesting. True. By giving commentary.
True. Well, they would have specialists in for this, so yeah. I mean, we could try. So, Dave, we're looking live at the Crooks fire right now, and as we can see, there is smoke.
Yeah, there's not only smoke, but as you can see from the trees, there's wind too.
There is wind.
Yeah. So
yes, wind and smoke.
It's moving, as you can see, kind of towards the left, which would be more towards the north position. But yeah, lots of smoke. Not a lot of fire.
No, not that we can see.
And maybe every once in a while we might actually see, aircraft passing through, doing something. But yeah.
So far, I have seen a bird.
All right, good.
I did. It was a raven, so it was a large bird. Would be very similar to a VLAT, only in bird form. VLAT being a very large air tanker. This is a raven, a very large bird.
Right. And then there's lots of dead and dying foliage out there that looks like it needs to probably burn anyways to try to get rid of that 60-year fuel loading that we've got out there. So. Well,
there is that. There's the fuel loading, mitigation factors. There's all kinds of issues there. But what we do know is that there are crews actively fighting the fire. Yep. And what we can see is smoke. And I just saw a change in the smoke. It's still blowing the other way.
Right. And it's gray smoke.
It is.
It's not heavy, dark, black smoke. So the gray smoke, it's just usually indicative of a wildfire. Right. So, yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is what it would be like if someone tried to bring experts together to discuss the video feed that we have of the Crooks fire. There's smoke. And quite honestly, if you live in the Prescott or Prescott Valley right now, there's smoke there.
Yep.
Because it's hard to see. Today was Admin Professionals Day. So you and we're recording on Wednesday, you and I went to Costco to do a little shopping so we could barbecue. And there was smoke there in the parking lot.
Yeah, that's why I worked inside, so that you could barbecue and add your burn offerings to the smoke that was already existing. So
We watched the smoke heading towards Prescott Valley. It was kind of like watching a fog bank move in because the wind slowed down. We're like, no, pick back up. We were enveloped in this the other day. So this morning, and I sent Jonah the picture so that we can use it. Someone sent me a tweet, quote unquote, from Elon Musk. And Mr. Musk, if you're one of the tens viewers that watches this or listens on podcasts, if you could actually do this, that would be great. But it said, AMR, you're next. How awesome would that be?
I'm sure AMR might not mind it if he paid top dollar for them, to buy them out. But yeah.
Well, I say we ask them to come in and be on our side and help us out. And then we can create better jobs for people and ensure that there's actually coverage for service.
Yeah. I mean, start off baby steps. We'll allow more freedom of speech, and then we'll go from there. How about that?
We could do that. And I mean, there's some people, we could get some new leadership in positions, and I think you'd see some changes. I did reach out to the town of Prescott Valley today because they gave us a draft of their general plan through 2035. And in one section of it, it said that the area is covered, Prescott Valley is covered by Lifeline for transport, and they're covered using 25 units that are in the system.
Yeah, I don't know where that number came from, because that is definitely not true.
And
25 units, we would never have a problem if they had 25 staffed units in this area.
So I took it upon myself to email the town manager and correct the record and say, usually in the town of Prescott Valley, on a good day, 3 or 4, usually 2, certainly not 25, unless you're looking at an entire system, and that would not be CON 62, even though there's 9,000 square miles or 8,667, there's not 25 units.
Right, yeah.
Unless you're trying to count the units that are down at the auto repair shop where we see them stacked up.
Yeah, I mean, even then I would be dubious that they had 25 sitting there.
Yeah, because normally they use the number 11.
Right.
Which we still don't see. But the bottom line is the general plan is not accurate. And I also asked him or recommended that they change it from naming Lifeline directly to stating that a majority of the transports are covered by a private ambulance service in the area, because there's potential in the future that there could be another ambulance service up here, private, and there's potential for us to have our CON as well. Mm-hmm. So, just if the general plan is going to be through 2035, I want to help them reflect what that looks like.
Right.
So taxes, Dave, because we have spent the first part of this talking about everything but, because, well, taxes suck. And there's 2 things certain in life, death and taxes. And there are 2 things that people certainly don't like in life, and that's taxes and death.
Right. Yeah, taxes are definitely right up there with the 4-letter words that nobody likes. And it's kind of one of those things that it gets imposed on you and you really don't agree with. And a lot of times people have to endure them, even going up, when they have no real reason as to understand why. Whether it's your utility company, raising rates on your electricity or on your cable service or something,
sure.
you always expect that there's going to be some sort of benefit from that. And when there isn't, then people get very upset. And I think it's the same way with taxes. If there's going to be some visible benefit, then the public usually is okay with it. Mm-hmm. But if there's not some benefit that they see, they're going to have a little bit of a problem with it.
Well, and I think that's where we are this year, Dave, because let's just cut to the chase. And that's the tax rate for Chino Valley and the tax rate for Central Yavapai are going up. At what level, we don't know yet. The board will give us direction on that. But we'd be remiss if we didn't recognize and point out that we understand that without the rate increasing, you're already paying more in taxes because the net assessed valuation went up in your home as well.
Yeah, you're absolutely right, Chief. Just by virtue of the net assessed valuation that occurs year over year, the Yavapai County Assessor's Office goes in and assesses what they usually can get away with from a statutory standpoint, which is a maximum of 5% per residential property. And whether that's a multifamily dwelling or whether it's just a single family dwelling, that 5% is limited, but it's usually also the maximum that they get assessed. And so by virtue of that alone, your taxes are going up how much you pay by 5%.
Well, and let's differentiate real quick, because there's a lot of people that have moved from Arizona, and I didn't understand when I moved here. But in Arizona, there's two levels of property tax, so to speak. You are two different value levels for a home. So you have your full market cash value of a home. So let's say a home was built in Granville and it was purchased for $300,000 5 years ago, and today it's worth $600,000 or $650,000. Right? That's the full market value.
Yes.
We are on the limited value. Now, the limited value in the home is set, correct me if I'm wrong, at 10% less than the full cash value of the home.
Yeah.
So
usually.
If it's $300,000 for full market value, then the value of that brand new home would have been around $270,000 as far as property taxes. And that number is limited to go up by 5% per year. Doesn't matter what the full market value of the house does. The limited value, what we can assess property taxes on, is only a 5% increase. Is that accurate?
That's correct. And under that limited value as well, there are certain restrictions as to when that property could be revalued. And it's not whenever you sell the property. So most people that are coming here from out of state or that are investing in this area, when they see property that is resold and resold and resold because of the fact that the market, it keeps going up and up and up for these properties, and the value keeps increasing, the actual limited value stays the same. It doesn't change from owner to owner to owner. And so for us as a fire district, we basically are still having to provide service. Even though values of property are going up, we still have to provide service on what we have as the limited value.
So there's no reset upon the sale. Now, California, and I'm not trying to use California as an example in the state of Arizona, but when they passed Prop 13, which did the same thing as Prop 117, which was limited the rate at which a property value could increase, and then they realized that, wow, these properties are outpacing, and the demand for services is outpacing what you can draw in property taxes. So they they passed a bill that allowed a reset of the value of the home at the sale of the home, which makes sense. No one in the state of Arizona has the foresight, or has had the foresight at this point, to do that. So that remains the same. So I did a little math yesterday, Dave.
You know, I'll be interested to see how this turns out. But all right, go ahead.
Yeah, I did math, and so what I did was I took that example I used of 300,000, 270,000, and then I said, okay, after the first year, the house goes up 5%, because we're in a market where it goes up 5%. How much is 5% on 270,000? Then I added it to that price of the home, or to the limited value. And then for the next year, I did 5% of that number, and I did that for 5 times. And then I looked at, okay, if that home would have sold for $600,000 today and had it reset back at the limited number, 10% less, it would have been about $570,000 in limited value. And what I found was, over a 5-year period, there was about a $200,000 difference in what we could tax on from the limited value versus what the limited value would be had the value of the home reset at sale.
Right.
That's pretty significant amount of money that we're not able to realize to respond to the demand for service.
Yeah, between the two fire districts, we looked at some of the statistics. In the Chino Valley area, it's almost 28% differential between what the limited property values are and what the full cash values are. In the Prescott Valley area, it's almost 40% difference. In the Prescott area, it's approaching close to 60% difference. that kind of recovery we will never be able to see in our lifetimes.
No.
For being able to see the limited property values increase by that amount. And again, part of that is because the design of the Prop 117 was to suppress the ability for tax increases, which, as we talked about, taxes are four-letter words. Nobody likes to hear them, right? But on the flip side of that, from an organization that's trying to meet call volume and demand from the public that you be there within a certain time frame, and you are there to save my life, and you are there to save my property, it makes it extremely difficult for us to be able to meet those needs when we don't have the revenue to be able to do that with.
That's correct. And so when a new home is built today at the current market values, so let's say a home is built and it sells for $600,000, so the limited set at $570,000. If the value of that property decreases, then the limited value decreases. So at current market rates for a new home, we will see a loss in revenue when the value of the home drops. But as the value of the home goes up, we will not see any increase in revenue.
Right. Yeah, that's absolutely correct. It's almost like an inverse proportionate.
Right.
Because it's somewhat regressive in how they taxed.
Right.
Because it really doesn't, as anybody that works in these areas knows, your cost of living is going up probably greater than 5% per year. Our costs go up greater than 5% per year.
Yeah.
And so for us to be able to try to meet the needs of the public and be able to pay our bills and have our revenue basically limited by 5%, and then if there is as a lot of economists are kind of pointing out, there's going to be either a stalling or even a potential regression again of the economy. That is going to have an impact then on those values of those houses again,
right.
And which will directly impact us.
Well, I talked to a home builder recently, and he said that the adjustable rate mortgages, as interest rates are going up, are becoming more popular. And immediately, my spidey senses go up and say, "Wait a minute, there's red flags all over here."
Oh yeah,
that's reminiscent of 2007, 2008. But here's the kicker: what he said was, "Hey, we need to start looking at more creative ways to get these loans through." And I'm like, "Oh no." When you start talking about creative loan processes, that's how we got to 07, 08. Let's not do that.
Right.
So another challenge we face is at the same time we have Prop 117 limiting all of this, the state legislature is slowly reducing the rate that can be charged on a commercial property. And so last year was the first time they got legislation through, and it reduced the rate from 18% to 16% over a 2-year period. Now, it did allow for an increase in the tax rate cap for fire districts. So the cap is at $325. It went up to $337.5 this year, goes up to $350 next year. This legislative session, they passed another reduction from 16% to 15% and gave us a $375 cap for fire districts. Now, here's the difficulty with that. I think there's a couple of things. One, if our agency, for example, is on the central Yavapai side, is nowhere near the tax cap. So for Chino Valley, it did give room, which is great given our increased costs. Not great in that we have to raise the rate, but there's capacity now. On the central Yavapai side, we have to raise the rate for a variety of reasons, but one of those is we can't collect the same as we did on a commercial property. So residential homeowners see their tax rates go up and what they're paying go up. And it's not the legislature who's to blame at that point. It's us, because nobody realizes that, hey, they cut the rate on commercial properties, which we're not arguing against. Here's a statement of fact. If we have to collect $100 to operate, just a random number, we have to collect $100 no matter what. Doesn't matter which pocket you want to take it out of, we have to get to $100. So if this person no longer has to pay this rate, well, now the rate has to go up and you're going to have to pay a little bit more.
Yeah, and you're exactly right. I mean, what it ends up doing is there's a shift that's occurring, and it's been occurring for a while now in the state of Arizona, where commercial property and commercial businesses are trying to with their justification that, hey, listen, the amount of emergency services that get actually attributed to commercial property is very low. And so their thought is that the people that actually use the services should be paying for it, which is the residents and the citizens in the area, not the actual businesses.
Right.
And so their thought process is, why are we paying a higher tax rate than the actual residents who live here? So they're trying to slowly bring their tax ratio down, their assessment ratio down, actually almost to the level of the same as a regular home.
Sure.
Down to 0.1% or 10%. So when they eventually are moving in that direction, you're exactly right. If you have 10 people, and of the 10 people, 3 of them are supposed to be paying, in your example of $100, 3 of them are supposed to be paying $10 each, and then out of the other 7, they're split between the $7 each or $70 each between them. And then all of a sudden one person doesn't have to pay as much, then the other people are going to get stuck with the bill. And ultimately the residents are the ones that kind of see that, even though there's a lot more residents, obviously, than commercial property. In Century Yavapai, we're about 14% of our total tax bill comes from commercial property.
Right.
But when the amount of that 14% is pretty significant. So when all of a sudden they start lowering that amount that they are able to pay or will be paying, that literally gets pushed over to the residential side.
Well, and the people left holding the bag are you and I and our staff at the fire agency level, because folks don't understand that the commercial property owners are getting a break. We still have to collect X number of dollars to be able to operate, which means we're going to have to take more from you. So they don't know what the legislature has done of what they've passed. And so the homeowners aren't going to the business owners saying, hey, wait a second, you're shifting the property burden onto us, property tax burden. They're not going to the legislature saying, wait a minute, we don't agree with the direction you're going, if that's how they feel. So we're the ones who get yelled at for having to do this, and trying to explain at that point that, no, here's how this went.
Right.
We're never mind. We're at fault.
And I would ask you, Chief, I mean, and the tens of listeners out there,
right?
How many of us as private citizens have lobbyists? How many of us as private citizens employ lobbyists to go down to the state legislature and lobby on our behalf for tax decreases and to see that we pay less and less? That you don't see that. And the reason why is because those businesses pay a lot of money for lobbyists to go down and to make sure that their voices are heard.
Sure.
But the private citizen doesn't. And the private citizen usually is the one that ends up paying. Now, I will say that the state of Arizona has kind of taken a little bit more proactive approach in trying to reduce their income taxes.
Right.
But if your income tax is lowered, again, you got to collect the money from somewhere. And so property taxes or surcharge taxes or fuel taxes, or, I mean, let's name off all the different types of taxes that are out there that a lot of people just do not even understand that they're paying for.
Well, I have family that lives in Texas. They're like, our income tax is so much lower and our property taxes are so much lower. You can't get on the highway out there without paying a fee.
Yeah, toll. Yep.
So that adds up when you're paying that every month. I don't know what the charge is to get a pass in your car so you can drive to work every month, but look, it costs an amount of money to run a governmental agency. They're going to get that same amount of money from somewhere. It's how do you want to pay it?
Right.
So I talked to a business owner the other day who's one of the larger businesses in our area, and I said, your rate for your business is going down, but what you're going to pay on your home is going up. Now, I think that the system was unbalanced the way the state set it up initially. And so as they work to balance that out with something that's more fair, there is a shift. I think the difficulty that I have is that we become the scapegoats.
Yeah, well, we're always to blame.
Yeah, it's your fault. I didn't do this.
Right.
And that's why they're currently trying to run a referendum, but there is some other discussion about trying to get some small level of sales tax for fire districts to diversify our financial portfolio.
Yeah.
Which to me makes sense. As we know, and we've talked about it before, if you're in the city of Prescott, they have a municipal fire department that's paid for by sales tax dollars. And anyone who visits, all the tourists that come through and they visit in Prescott and they stay at a hotel, they eat lunch, they buy goods there, if they call 911, they've actually contributed to the cost of the fire department. If you've come into Prescott Valley, say one of our large soccer tournaments, and you've stayed in the hotels, you've eaten at the restaurants, all of those things, and you crash your car and we have to respond, well, it's all of our property tax payers who are paying for that. Your sales tax doesn't go towards us at all. So there's no contribution from the person who used the system to help pay for the system. And in the state, if you're a city or town, you have the ability to ask the voters to implement a small portion of property tax to help fund your city. Mm-hmm. So the city of Prescott has a sales tax, and they have a very small property tax. And I find it laughable that someone actually tried to compare us to the city of Prescott and say their property taxes are 10 times higher than what we pay for the city fire department. Like, that's a complete misunderstanding of how that city fire department in Prescott is funded.
Right.
That is mainly funded through sales tax, not the little bit of property tax that they get. We are solely funded through property tax. You cannot compare the two and have any type of logical comparison or argument.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think that the way that a lot of our funding comes from is property taxes, and it's almost 85% of our entire revenue. We do have some through contracts that we get, and we obviously have fees for service depending upon what kind of services we're providing. We do charge for those, but the vast majority of our money comes from property taxes. And so if property values go up, even at 5%, we're kind of grateful because we're seeing some increase into our revenue. But if property values go down or level off, well, then we're going to be stagnant as far as our revenue. Having a little bit of sales tax, and I think that if I remember correctly, it's 1/10 of a cent sales tax, which means that on a $10 purchase, you would pay 1 penny.
Right.
And what that would do for fire districts is diversify our income enough that we wouldn't have to be worrying every single year, how are we going to be able to make our bills?
Right.
I almost want to say that in some ways we feel like a lot of the retired community in this area that have fixed incomes. They are worrying every single year, how are they going to pay their bills? And so we empathize with you. We understand that. And unfortunately, we're in the same boat.
Yeah. Well, and if you look at building a new fire station today, because if we consider the growth in the area, the call volume increases we're seeing, and we really start digging into the data, which as we move towards accreditation again, we're going to be going back through standards of cover and really looking at what are our response times if we define them under the urbanicity standards, urban, suburban, rural, because we have some areas, Prescott Valley as an example, that in some ways would be considered more urban because of the population density. And I think what we're going to find is our response times aren't where they need to be because the increased call volume. We simply can't meet demand. Well, a fire station when we built 58 was what, 2.5 million?
Yeah, the total out the door costs, actually we had contracted at 2.6 and we walked away actually about 2.2.
And that doesn't happen in today's construction dollars. If you contract at 2.6, it's going to cost you 3.6 or 4. But right now we're getting estimates of a new fire station at $6 to $8 million.
Yeah,
we cannot tax property tax wise enough to build a fire station. So how do we meet that demand? And it costs us about $1.5 million to staff a station annually, ongoing costs. So how do we increase the tax rate enough to fund the resources that are needed? And there just isn't a good way to do that. There's certainly not a popular way to do that. Again,
just like you said, taxes, right? Yeah. It's more taxes. And people are, don't want to be taxed any more than they already are. But the problem is that doesn't stop people from moving here. And it doesn't stop, us keeping tax rates low and keeping it attractive of this area doesn't prohibit people from moving here, and they love this area, which I think is great. I mean, it's a really nice area. But when you move here, there's lots and lots of a ripple effect that affect the services in this area.
Right.
And so, unfortunately, we can't tax enough to be able to turn around and have those things without coming up with, as we put it, creative financing.
Yes.
That is really not attractive to taxpayers or to the citizens. Right. And so we turn around and are kind of throwing up our hands in some ways and saying, hey, how are we going to do this? But again, I guarantee you, just like when our taxes go up and people are angry about that, they will also be angry when we don't show up at their house.
Right.
And we don't help save their property, or we don't put out fires, or we don't mitigate some of the incidents that we run on. So, yeah.
Well, and we're trying to pay a living wage here, which we can't do for a starting firefighter. We are actually living in a time where our housing market in the Quad Cities, I put it this way to a group the other day, we have California housing prices with Arizona wages, and the two do not mix. And because we're kind of an island in the Quad Cities, really, if you think about it, there aren't a lot of options for affordable housing. And I was talking to Humboldt Unified recently, joking about our efforts to hire a human resources manager. And they said, hey, we offered a job to a CFO who's the second highest paid person in the district. And ultimately, after looking at housing in the area, they declined the offer because they couldn't get housing.
Yeah.
That's not good for the Quad Cities. It's not good for our way of life. It's certainly not good for our future. And it doesn't bode well for us looking for an HR manager, and that's a higher paid position. When we're looking at entry-level radio techs for Jonah, or we're looking at new firefighters or admin, it's very difficult today. I mean, many of us were fortunate to move in here while the housing prices were reasonable, and many of our folks were able to buy houses years ago while the housing prices were actually low. But it's changed, and it has changed rapidly, and that creates a challenge for all of us up here, and recruitment and potentially retention. Because if a person's going to have to drive an hour and a half into work every day, how long are they going to choose to do that before they say, you know what, Scottsdale's hiring, that looks attractive, and I can live in a community that's 30 minutes away and buy a home and live with my family and not spend 3 hours every 24 hours on the road.
Yeah, it's definitely the rapidly changing economy in this area is definitely putting a lot of pressure on recruitment and retention. And I don't think it's just for the fire service alone. I think it's for anybody who's trying to hire people in this area and trying to keep wages, because your personnel costs usually are your highest cost for your business. To keep those somewhat reasonable makes it tougher and tougher for any business to survive in this area. So, yeah. Well,
and our board, our elected officials, the people that you all elect to represent you, they're in a tough position. I mean, they've done a really good job, I think we all have, working together over the last 5 or 6 years to really maintain a solid tax rate. You haven't seen big spikes in tax rates. Some years it's remained completely neutral. Some years it's gone up 3/4 or 1 cent. That said, we also know that the property valuations have gone up. So everybody is paying more, but we maintain the same rate. We simply can't do that this year, and the board is trying to balance. We have all these increases in costs, and here's a couple of options. We don't want to raise the rate too much too quick, but at the same time, we need to be able to do the job that we're here to do.
Right.
And how do you balance that? And you're certainly not going to make everybody happy with it. But you don't want to pull the pin on a grenade, so to speak, and throw that either, because personally, I see, and I hate to say this for those who are not CAFMA employees, but taxpayers here that are paying the bill, I see more rate increases coming over the next few years, especially as we really dig into this accreditation process and we look at what are the standards we're supposed to be following, and what are our actual response times versus the call volume, and what's it going to take to get us to the point where we are responding within those standards. I think right now we are, but there's some question about how long we can sustain that with the call volume that we have and with the growth. So, lots of challenges. They're not insurmountable. The problem is to overcome them. Our elected officials, senior staff, we have to make some tough decisions about what that rate looks like. And that puts the burden on the taxpayer. I will point out that, hey, we live here. We pay the same taxes everybody else does for property taxes. It's not like we want to just tax ourselves to death. That's not it. But you need to at least understand some of the challenges that we face in ensuring that when you call 911, there is a unit that is equipped properly and staffed properly to respond to your emergency. And we may only come into contact with 1% of our population, and I don't want to say that's part of the problem, because we don't want to come into contact with everybody on a 911 call. But the fact of the matter is, those who use 911 tend to have more of appreciation for it, or who have seen our folks in action, more of an appreciation for it than those who have never had to use one.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I think that it's kind of like your car insurance. You're paying on something and paying on something and paying on something, hoping that you never, ever have to use it. But then when you do have a wreck and it's there and it's able to, provide you the coverage, the financial coverage that you're expecting, and plus you get your vehicle replaced, then, hey, listen, it was worth it, right? And I think that 911 is the same way. A lot of people are saying, why do I pay this? Why do I pay this? And then all of a sudden, when they do have, or they know of somebody that has had to use 911, then at that point they're like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that it was there, and that it, that it's at the level that we anticipated, and that even in some cases a lot higher than what they even anticipated. Sure. But yeah, there is definitely a cost for doing business for this, and I think that that's one of the things that when we created CAFMA, and even before then, I think that we tried to emphasize even to our personnel as well as to the citizens, we understand the business end.
Right.
We're not just saying, hey, giving you worst case scenarios, like if you don't fund us, the whole world's going to burn to the ground, and children are going to die and all that kind of stuff. We don't abide by that. We understand there's a business, and so we approach this from a business end. And so when we look at this from a finance and financial planning and a business perspective, we understand what we're supposed to do, and we also understand there's a cost to it. So we keep that in mind when we present that to the board, so that we're able to educate them and educate the community, hopefully in a way that they understand. We're cognizant and we're mindful of your tax dollars. We don't waste them. We don't spend them frivolously. We definitely try to come down to really good options for everybody.
Right. And we started this segment talking about the Crooks Fire, and let me be clear, we were making fun of news outlets, not the Crooks Fire. I just want to be clear on that before we close out this week. But it's in these times where folks are seeing the smoke, and the smoke's enveloping our community, that people are very thankful for our firefighters, both whether they're federal, Prescott National Forest, or DFFM, Department of Forestry and Fire Management for State of Arizona, or our local resources, Prescott CAFMA, and for all of those that come into our community to assist in protecting and trying to control and contain that fire. It's a very dangerous situation on the ground, and I know the incident management team that's there is working very hard to ensure everyone's safety. And so I'd just like to say thank you to those in the community who have reached out with the kind words, the prayers for the firefighters on the fire line that are working, the offers of water and other goods to help support the firefighters on the ground, because it's in these times where you really see a community come out and come together, and there's more of an appreciation. What I would ask is, when the Crooks Fire is over, remember that. This is why we're here, because a lot of folks tend to forget once the smoke clears why our firefighters are in the stations, why they're on the street, why they are where they are. And that's for these types of situations, or your motor vehicle crash, or your medical emergency, home structure fire, whatever. we're here to serve you, but that service isn't free. It costs money to do this job. And we just want to share some of the challenges that we face so people better understand. And we want to be very open and honest. Yes, we know you're paying more. Yes, we know the rate is going to make you pay even more than that. We totally understand it. We have to be able to operate.
Yeah.
And that's the bottom line. And like you said, we try to operate it as a business, not wasting money, and being very conservative in our approach to finance and budgeting.
Right.
And if anybody has questions about that, they can certainly call in and sit down with us and take a look at the budget. It's fairly easy to follow once you look at it and understand it. But with that, Dave, I want to wish you all the best Friday.
Thank you.
I
won't be hobbling in circles now that my right leg is, getting fixed. So,
well, you won't be hobbling in circles for the first couple of weeks because you can't bear weight. After that, you will still be in circles because you can't move.
We'll see.
But we're going to get that wheelchair all set up for you because we have ideas.
Oh, man.
Because we care, Dave. That's why we're here. So with that, Jonah, hey, thanks again. I appreciate it. Thanks for setting up that video for the incident management team so they had some kind of a bird's eye view of things. Dave, thanks for coming in last minute.
You bet.
Like that and going shopping with me today and helping cook things up for our administrative professionals. We greatly appreciate the job they do for us every day.
Yes.
So with that, thank you all for watching. Please remember to click like and subscribe. And until next week, keep watching our videos, or somebody watch them or listen. We don't care.